Today I want to talk about applied theory and the major scale and just some basic understanding of the intervals of the major scale. Nothing too deep, but as the name applies, we're going to do some application of this idea on the guitar neck so we can understand it better. And that's key to progressing. I think on the guitar it's easy to learn shapes and chord forms and things like that, and it's a lot of fun and it's a part of the guitar, and you don't have to go beyond that if you don't want to, but there often comes a time in a progressing guitar player's life where he or she wants to understand, music a little bit better and maybe understand what they're doing a little bit better. And I find that intermediate players especially, who've been playing for a while and can do technically some stuff and have a good feel for the instrument, get frustrated because their language isn't really developing. And usually what the case is that they actually do understand a lot of stuff. They just don't know what that stuff is and how it connects. So usually breaking it down and thinking about some core concepts is helpful to sort of keep a handle on things. So in this case, we're just going to talk about how intervals make up a scale and how we're going to just kind of keep track of them. So the first thing that you want to understand and make sure you understand is the musical alphabet. So the musical alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And so those are your notes without accidentals. And you also want to understand half steps and whole steps. So half steps, it's kind of the smallest increment between two notes in Western music. Arguably, I understand, bends and quarter tones and all that stuff definitely exist, but particularly for a fretted instrument, just the way things are laid out in octave form, we just separate by half steps. So anytime you go from one fret to another, you're playing a half step. So you can think numerically there, so 0 to 1, 1 to 2, so on and so forth. Every time you move 1, you're going to be playing a half step. So in this case, if I went 0 to 1, that's a half step. 1 to 2, half step. 2 to 3, half step. 3 to 4. So it's easy to see those half steps on the neck. It's a little harder sometimes when we're playing half steps on adjacent strings, like if I did, E here to F, okay? It's a cool little sound there. But, it's hard to see that visually. You have to kind of just know that and to think intervallically. And that's why the guitar can be challenging in this way. But it's good practice just to be aware and to start practicing. So the half steps, if you take 2 of them, then, you get a whole step. So anytime you go numerically like 2, 4, 6, 8, every time you go 2, you're going to be going whole step. So if we started on 0 and went to 2, that's a whole step. 2 to 4, that's a whole step. 4 to 6, that's a whole step. Okay? So those are your 2 basic interval types, distance-wise. And if you take those and you put them into a formula of, it's like 2 tetrachords, they say, which is 3 notes, separated by an interval of a whole step, which would be, that's kind of confusing, but it goes whole step, half step, that's a tetrachord, and then a whole step, and then same tetrachord, whole step, half step. So maybe you don't want to think about all that, but just the order of the intervals: whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And if you memorize that, if you begin and end on the root of a scale, so A or B or C, whatever it is, and you go all the way through the musical alphabet and you end up on that note again, if you follow that formula, you're going to have to alter tones in most every case to sharps or flats, you're going to get a major scale. Now, C major is just going to be C to C, no sharps, no flats, the only major scale like that. So if you play from C here, let's say, up to this C here, and you go through the musical alphabet, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then end on C, you'd get this sound. All right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay? And so that's like the major scale everybody's familiar with. If I was to go, let's say, to D and end on D, up the neck, and play like this shape that you might know, I'd be going through the musical alphabet with a couple of sharps in this case, because we have to alter it to make sure those intervals are the same. I went up here. That's a G major there. I could go here, play from B and go to B, play B major. Okay? So you're probably playing some of these ideas already, and it's good to understand kind of what's going on. The thing that we're going to do with this is we're just going to think about the intervals. Now, there are types of intervals: major, minor, perfect, diminished, and augmented. And you might want to kind of make a note of that and memorize major, minor, perfect, augmented, and diminished. But we're not really going to get that deep today, because you can also have numeric value for the intervals. So there are 7 notes plus the octave 8 in a major scale, just in a single octave. And so each of those individual notes in the major scale can get a number. So if we go back to the C major, we could go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, or we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, octave, or 8. And so each of those individual notes in the scale in that octave is going to have a number. So it'd be like the D is 2, E is 3, and so on. And that's important. And even though it's not all the information, it's a lot of the information. And to be perfectly honest, when I'm working with intervals and I'm working with scales and chords, I'm not really thinking major, minor, perfect, diminished, that kind of thing. Mostly, I'm thinking flatted or sharp. And in the major scale, none of the intervals are flatted or sharped. So it doesn't matter what the note is. Like an A sharp could be, a flat something, I guess. But I mean, the idea is that the individual note as it relates back to the root. So like if I had C to D, that's my second. If I lowered that second, like did a flat second, I'd go C to D flat. So that's a flat second, minor second, that kind of thing. So let's not go too far with that right now. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about it in a second. But what you want to do is you want to apply this whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step to the individual guitar strings starting on 0 and ending on 12. And if you do that, you'll visually be able to see the major scale. You'll also understand kind of, the sound and how it relates between the notes. So if we did the application up the neck starting on E and ending on E, we'd go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Okay? And the important thing is to really think of those numbers. So every string is going to be the same relationship because the intervals are going to be the same. So if you start on, the fifth string A, same thing. So you don't want to get lost in that pattern or shape-based way of thinking. You really want to sort of like focus your mind and think, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 are octave. And that's going to get you used to just separating those intervals out. Now, that's the very basic way to do it, and that's a lot of information, a lot of stuff to do right there. But if you want to do a little bit more with it, we could kind of do this like bonus application where you want to play from the root to each of the intervals and then kind of back to the root and keep track of that. So like, for instance, we'd start with the E and then we'd go to the second. And so you want to think, okay, there's my second. Then you go back to the E and maybe go to the third. There's my third. So that distance is the third. You go to the fourth, fifth, sixth, and then the 7. Okay? Those are individual notes, just intervals, and they exist because they're referencing another note. So the note here, which is an F sharp, it's the second because E is the root or the 1. You understand? So F sharp's not always a second. Now, if that makes sense and you go through and do all that stuff, then the other thing that you could do is you could try your hand a little bit at some altered intervals or some flatted sharp intervals. And that can be a little tricky, a little confusing, but give it a go. There is a sheet that has all this information on it. If you link to my website, there's a PDF you can download. So there's a few very common altered intervals, a flat second and a flat third. The sharp 4 and the flat 5 are enharmonic. The sharp 5 and the flat 6 are enharmonic. That means they're the same note. And then a flat 7. So those are all very common intervals or altered intervals that you could do within the single key. So instead of going, say, 0 to 2 for the major second, listen to what the second, listen to what the flat second sounds like. That 1 fret half step is a flat second. You go to a flat third, so the third we know is at 4. So if you just drop it down a half step, that's a flat third. So you go to the 4th, you could sharp that 4, so you get like a tritone. So that's your sharp 4 or your flat 5th. Just kind of depends how it's functioning. So that can be confusing, but you know, it's okay. This will come back. So instead of your 5th, you go to a sharp 5th, which is the same as a flat 6. Here's your 6, so that note in between. And then our flat 7, which is very useful because that's our dominant sound in a major scale. So like a C major 7, just to give you a little bit of sidebar here, a C major 7 is a major chord with a major 7th, which is just a natural 7th in the key. Okay? If we flat that 7, then we're going to end up with a dominant chord. Okay? So that's that one note. Changes things. So that's what I mean by like the intervals make the difference. Now you could just move that stuff around and it would sound great. You know, like you don't have to know. You really don't. It all comes down to language though. And I think that starting with these intervals, understanding numerically what's going on is really the way that you can kind of get going on it. Now what we're going to do, I think I'm going to try to do a series with just this concept. I didn't really have a plan for these weekly blog things, so you know, I think it's just going to happen as it goes. But I think I'm going to try to do a few more of these. We got to get into some cage concepts so you're able to understand, you know, how this stuff works on the neck, and we map the neck out so we don't have to talk about it anymore. So stick with this for the next few weeks, and we'll do some open scales and we'll do some closed position scales, kind of get that out of the way and understand the intervals. Okay. So I hope this is helpful. I have a sheet for a PDF of this, like I said, on my website. So if you follow the link over there, you can download that and have it for your notes. And if you like this, please subscribe, pass it along. And you know, if you want some lessons, you can find me on Skype. I can help you out. Or if you're in the Detroit area, I teach out of my house in the city of Detroit and also at my school in the suburbs out in Lake Orion. So I hope this helps you. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear that too. Take care. Happy picking.